All right, so the next aspect of the mind that we want to cover is the fact that the mind has this natural tendency to ramble into the past and the future. If anybody has not experienced this in the last 30 minutes, please swap places with me. You should be the one teaching us. The nature of the mind is to drift off into things that have got nothing to do with what we're really doing. All right, if you've ever had to study anything for an exam or whatever, you start reading, get to the bottom of the page, and what do you realize? I have no idea what I just read. My eyes kind of recognized the words and the sentence structure, but if you ask me what I just read, go back, start again, read. The nature of the mind is to drift off. Why is this problematic? We lose our concentration. If you're on the road, do you want everybody around you to be concentrating? Of course you do. If you're on the operating table, do you want your surgeon to be concentrating? Yes. If you're cooking a meal, should you be concentrating? Of course. You don't want to cut the end of your finger off or add a tablespoon of salt instead of a teaspoon of salt. The quality of our action is diminished if we're not concentrating on what we're doing, so we don't get the result that we want. These muffins taste a little funny. You've got to throw them all out because you added way too much salt. Oh, the patient's died again. I guess I should have been thinking about what was going on here. The quality of all of our activities are diminished. Now, these are really obvious examples. But on Monday, you're going to go to your workplace and you're going to perform an action to try and get something done. If you're not concentrating on what you're doing, the outcome will not be what you want it to be. You must learn to concentrate. Second aspect, efficiency of action is lost. This is essentially the same thing. Fatigue and frustration. Think of it this way. You're standing in the middle of a large room and you run all the way to the other side of the room and then you run back. Then you run to that side of the room and then you run back. And you do it all day. What's it like? It's pretty tiring. By the end of the day, you are physically fatigued. What's your mind doing? Instead of being here, it's running over there. And so what do you have to do when you recognize it's gone for a run? Wind it back in, put it back. And of course it drifts off again. You've got to wind it back in again and put it back. So we get this tremendous fatigue in the mind, this tiredness, because it's expended all of its energies and running around all day and having to be dragged back again. If we can hold the mind on the present activity through effort, we save so much energy. But we don't do this. We get to the end of the day and we're tired because of the expenditure of energy. But the mind at the same time has been running over here and running over here and running over here. It's built up some momentum, so what do we also find? I lie down, I put my head on the pillow, the mind just won't stop. I'm tired, I'm fatigued, and I can't sleep. This is a pretty good definition of hell. So what do? Pop a pill. Off I go. I was recently, this is nothing to do with philosophy, but you should know it nonetheless. I was listening to an interview with a guy who runs the Human Sleep Research Center up in Berkeley, and he was asked a question, so what about these sleeping pills like Ambien, for example? Does that give you good quality sleep? You know where this is going. And he says, no, it does not. It'll get you to sleep, but it does not give us the good quality sleep that the brain needs, that the mind needs in order to function properly in our daily life. Natural, healthy sleep is what we need, not drug-induced. But it's difficult because the mind is tired and still running. Sleeplessness. So then what we need to do is to develop concentration. What is concentration? So the analogy we sometimes use to describe this is that of a river. So earlier we were using an analogy of adult-child. Here we're using an analogy of the river. the water in the river is like the mind in the personality. The mind just flows wherever it wants to go. Right? You take water, pour it on the top of this table, it'll just flow wherever it wants to go. If this table had a beveled edge, had a raised edge, I should say, the water gets to the edge and goes no further. So is the case when it comes to a river. The water goes where the banks of the river tell it to. Now, if the banks of the river are shallow and weak, what happens when you get a flood of water coming through? Bursts the banks, overflows, and destroys homes and houses. If the banks of that river are strong and deep, then you can have a massive torrential flow of water, and you can use that. You can put a water wheel in it and generate electricity, serve the community. So too, our mind flows through us like water through a pipe. The banks of the river are the intellect. Again, it's the development of an intellect which has this capacity to guide the mind. So this is what concentration is. So this is from one of our texts that we study at the Vedanta Academy. He says, concentration is the art of the intellect, holding the mind on the present action without allowing it to slip into the past or future. Again, this is great, but how do you do it? Think of it this way. If your eyes are somehow diseased, they have a cataract, you can't see properly, they can't perform the function that they naturally perform because they're diseased in some way. Take away the disease, what do you have to do to make your eyes see thereafter? Trick question. Nothing. Once you've taken the disease away, your eyes just function naturally according to what they do. So too, if you say your liver, if your liver is healthy, it just does what it's designed to do. Same sort of idea when it comes to the intellect. Once we have developed our intellectual strength, it just functions according to its nature, to direct the mind where the intellect has recognized as an appropriate place to go. It's effortless, it's natural. We often think of controlling the mind as being this intense effort. I have to hold the mind here. No, this is actually a good way to define suppression. In fact, sort of coming back to your meditation question from earlier, one of the other problems with meditation is that we're trying to put the mind somewhere, and when it kind of elbows its way out, we go, no, stay there. It tries to move it, no, stay there. This is not how we deal with the mind. The mind is a sensitive organ. You know, we treat our mind like it's made out of steel. It's not. It's a very sensitive thing. We should be very careful with it. Instead, what do? This is not how to manage the mind. There must always be effort, but it's judiciously implemented. So sufficient effort, but essentially what we're saying is the real effort should go in the development of the intellect, and then it will naturally perform its function of keeping the mind here. This is where the effort should go in this daily practice of just reflecting on philosophical ideas. So this is why he calls it an art. It's an intuitive sense of how to deploy your own intellectual capacities. This is the artistry of it. In the same way that if you're a painter and you turn to your friend and you've got a blank canvas in front of you and you say, what colour should I do the background? What's your friend going to say to you? I can't tell you that. Listen to your own creative urge. Look at that blank canvas. What do you see? I see blue transitioning into gold. Aha. There's my artistry coming forward. So no one can tell us what to do. They can give us the information, but we've got to understand it intuitively for ourselves. That comes through a correct understanding. Reflection, questioning. So this is the way we do it. Questioning and taking nothing for granted. Why does fake news work? Why is it a useful or a productive use of a person's money?
People don't question it.
People don't question. We don't have this attitude of taking nothing for granted. Good example of this is if you are a jury member in a court case and you've got the defendant saying stuff, you don't immediately believe what the defendant's saying, do you? You hold it at arm's length and say, maybe he's telling the truth, maybe he's not. It needs more investigation, it needs more evidence. This is not how we function when we're scrolling through our Facebook page. Trump did what? I'm outraged. Like, share, post. Yeah, someone made up something that is completely wrong and I'm believing it. Why? Because I'm taking for granted that what I'm seeing in front of me is true. Everywhere we go, whenever we hear an assertion being made, we should say, I wonder if it's true. Take nothing for granted, then question further to determine for ourselves. This is the way that we build the intellect. This is how it is achieved. Difficult. In the initial stages, it's difficult. Like anything, the more we do it, the more practiced we become. So this is the practice that we need to get our kids into as early as possible. Generally around about the age of 7 or 8, certainly by their 10, 12 or 13, this practice of questioning everything must be implemented in children. Unfortunately, it has to fall to parents and caregivers because schools are not doing enough of this. I know someone who says our schools are not doing any of it. They're completely and utterly useless when it comes to this. Now, I don't have the experience enough to make that claim, so I don't know if it's true, but this person does. He actually is on the board of a school. This is what education should be. The capacity in us to know how to think, not just to acquire lots of information and then spit it back out on an ACT. So, one of the solutions we've already covered, building the intellect. Another really powerful solution to maintaining our attention on the present moment is to have clearly set goals and ideals for your life. Why does this work? Okay, think of an example. Let's say you're in your home and you have a range of different things that you could do. I've got the gardening to do. I love gardening. I'll do that at some point. And I've got the dishes to do. I've got to cook a meal. And all these things are going on in your head, bouncing around. Then you look across the side of the room and you see a waste paper basket with a thin tendril of smoke rising from it. All of those other thoughts that you had of things that you could be doing, where do they go? Gone. Because you immediately put that very, very important goal into your life of finding out where that smoke is coming from and extinguishing it. This is a really great example when you start to reflect upon it. In that moment, you have a very clear goal. Nothing else has the capability of invading your awareness. It's not possible. Now, of course, once you've extinguished the flame, then it all comes crowding back in again. But this is the analogy. If I have a clear goal for this week, for this month, for 2018, for this decade, for my life, then I can maintain my attention on today, this week, this month, 2018, and my life. And other things that come crowding in and are asking me to divert my attention there and there and there, they've got no in. There's no chink in the armour. There's no crack in the wall of the dam for the water to get through. So if we set clear ideals or goals for our life, it will improve our capacity to concentrate. So we may set an overarching goal of, say, self-development. This is something that is pervading all through life. I may set a specific goal, say, for my marriage. I might say, I have this particular weakness or tendency and it expresses in my marriage. I want to improve myself in this way. I may have a specific goal in my workplace. So I'm very shy, very reticent, don't like to put myself forward, but I'm good at my job. But I find that other people take credit for my work and I'm not advancing the way I should. So my goal in my workplace is to be more forthright, more forthcoming, and speak up for myself. This is a goal for my workplace. So whatever the goal is, when we are enthusiastic towards it, we maintain our concentration. So when we're setting the goals for the different domains of our life and our life in general, it's important that we spend a decent amount of time crafting them. Don't just think, a good goal would be that. It's not going to work. Take time to think about what your goal for this particular domain of life should be, so that the intellect says, I understand this to be a good goal, and your mind must also participate. Your emotions must also say, I like the sound of that. This is, you could say, our definition of inspiration. Inspiration is the confluence of your understanding and your feeling towards something that is worthwhile achieving. This is something else you're probably going to be able to quote by the end of this series. There's a quote by Martin Luther King that I bring up all the time. He's writing in The Maroon Tiger, and he's writing about the purpose of education. He says education has a twofold purpose. One is to develop the power of concentration, and the other is to develop worthy objectives upon which to concentrate. Take a look at all of the things that you're doing in your life. Have you determined in advance, with clear understanding and with enthusiasm, this is a worthwhile project for my life? This is a good place to be spending my time, my money, my emotions, my efforts. My intellect says so, my mind says so. If that's not the case, then we don't have a goal, we don't have an ideal. We're just following the herd, doing what our parents asked us to do, or doing what our environment suggests we should do. This is not concentration. So we've already covered the notion that guidance or control is not suppression. This is what we mean by control. So when we talk about controlling the mind, we often think of grabbing the beast, wrestling it down to the ground into submission. This is not controlling the mind. Right? This is wrestling the mind. Okay? Sometimes you may need to do that, but those instances will be few and far between. Far better to understand control of the mind as you placing your attention on something else. Okay, I'll give you a good example. A friend of mine used to work as a server in a cafe, and she would bemoan the customer who would be there on a regular basis, different people but the same type of customer, grumpy, ungrateful, rude, doesn't leave a tip. And of course, when you meet someone like that as a server, there's a sort of disgruntlement, She'd get frustrated, and she's like, I'm frustrated in my job because I've got to deal with these sorts of people. What does she want to control? She wants to control those negative emotions that she's having. So what she would do, when she found the bad customer, she would take a few moments, go to the side of the cafe or whatever, and just sit and think, maybe he just lost his wife. Maybe he just lost his job. I'd be that upset too. Poor guy. There it is. The mind has been controlled. Not by dealing with her own aggression, but by taking her awareness to something outside the whole thing. And in this case also, it's unselfish because she's inquiring into the welfare of that individual. And this is a really important point. Redirection is one thing, but if our redirection is towards something that is less egocentric, less selfish, the efficiency or the power of that redirection is orders of magnitude bigger. It's because it's the selfish component that disturbs us. So this is what we mean by controlling the mind. Controlling the mind doesn't mean wrestling with it. It means taking your attention to something higher, something subtler. Where should my attention be placed right now? What am I thinking about, and why am I thinking it? One final analogy here. Many of us, I'm sure, are assiduous when it comes to reading the back of any food to check out the ingredients, to make sure it's vegan or gluten-free, or it's got no A, B, C, whatever. And if it's not fully organic, or if it's got E201 or whatever, take it away. My body is a temple. Do we have that same level of assiduity when it comes to the thoughts that we're entertaining? What's the quality of this thought, that SOB? I swear to God, if he says that to me one more time, I'm going to... Check the quality of your thought. Good quality thought, junk quality thought. You are what you eat. Your physical body is made up of all of the food you have eaten over the past X number of years. That's what your body's made up of. In fact, in Sanskrit, they describe the physical body as food sheath. It's made up of food, it becomes food for other creatures. Your mind, my mind, is a culmination of all of the thoughts and feelings that I have been feeding into it from this day backwards. Is this a junk thought? Is this a healthy thought? If it's a junk thought, take it away. My mind is a temple. We don't do this often enough. What am I thinking about? Why am I thinking it? What is the quality of this thought? Junk thought or healthy thought? And your own intellect decides. And what's important to remember here, it doesn't matter if you get it wrong. So I ask myself, I'm having a thought about something, and it seems to have a negative tinge to it. So I say, what am I thinking about? Oh, I'm thinking about when my boss at work yelled at me. I feel bad about it. Is this a junk thought or a healthy thought? Oh, it's a junk thought because I don't like it. So I jettison it. I say, no, thank you very much. Actually, I should have dealt with it. I should have dealt with the emotion. I should have dealt with why it came up, and I should have figured out what I'm going to do next. So I got it wrong. Is this a healthy thought or a junk thought? It was actually a thought that I should have kept entertaining. It doesn't matter. It really does not matter whether you get it right or wrong. The only thing that matters is whether or not we ask the question. And the more we ask the question, the more our proportion of right answers will improve.